Ahorita. Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. So where we're going to be picking up at this point is the bottom of page 55 and very, very bottom paragraph. And we're in the chapter We Agnostics and really been focusing on step two. And now what we're going to get into is my homie, my homeboy, my guy, Fitz Mayo, Fitzmayo. He's my guy. And he doesn't have to be yours. You don't have to be as jazzercised about him as I am, but I just love him. And I'll explain why as we go. So that's who we're going to be talking about. And Fitz Mayo, he's one of those early members. I'll put some pictures in the chat, and I know Rob made some cool AI ones that have his like sobriety date and his birthday and all of that. So if I put them in a smart place on my computer, we don't know if I did that, I will be putting those in the chat. So Fitz Mayo, page 55, very bottom paragraph. It says in this book, you will read the experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. And if we remember, when we're talking about the word agnostic, that word agnostic in our sort of modern contemporary language, it sort of means a bit of a fence sitter, like maybe there is, maybe there isn't, I don't know. Like that's sort of the modern language or connotation with agnostic. But I'm going to say we like etymology here. That doesn't necessarily need to be the case. I love etymology, and unfortunately, you're all dragged along with me. And the etymological origin of the word agnostic, we've spoken about this a number of times, but ag means without, and gnosis means knowledge. And when we talk about that gnosis, we're not talking about that head level, yeah, I know. That one that we've never given to a sponsor ever in our life. When our sponsor is telling us a spiritual suggestion again and again and again, and we're just absolutely ignoring it, but responding with, yeah, I know. That is, you guys would never, but that is not the knowing that we are talking about. It is not an intellectual knowing. It is a heart level, experiential knowing. That's what we're talking about. And so when each and every one of us comes to the second step, we might have belief. We might even have religion. We might have a set of doctrines that we're bringing to the table. Heck, we might have some prejudice and some old ideas, some baggage that we're trying to check away. But each and every one of us, when we come to the second step, has that experience of without knowing this power. And so he thought he was an atheist, but we're going to see what's going to crack him open. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart. Now, that change of heart, we're looking at a number of things, but for me, I'm finding that this is a sneaky little description of a spiritual awakening. Not his change of mind, as in, all right, I'll change my mind about the idea that there could be a power greater than myself. No, but the change of heart. And we'll see that change of heart referenced in the forgotten chapters. It'll be in Two Employers to undergo a change of heart. So his change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Is there anything you wanted to say about that paragraph, Terry? Pew pew.
No, let's keep going.
Cool. Did you want to take it or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, I could go. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war delusionment, even more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction. And this is my boy, man. It's you, Mayo. I mean, I'm just reading that paragraph and I'm like, that's me, you know. Um, Serious alcoholism, insanity, fatal illness, suicide, tried, frustration, self-destruction. I was not someone who grew up having religion thrown down my throat. My mom and my dad were both atheists. It was kind of fun, but they also celebrated Christmas, so it was kind of fun because and they also celebrated the Hanukkah because my mom's Jewish, but she doesn't believe in it, but she celebrates Hanukkah, so I get double the presents during the holidays. I loved it. Man, it was such a great environment for someone who's selfish and self-centered to prosper. Right. But that was the religion that I took on. Um, don't believe in anything, it doesn't matter, right? But I always pondered in something was out there. Even though I would go to church, even though I would go to, religious settings with my friends, I never really felt or had a gnosis what Paige is talking about, that experiential, right? Look at the nine step promises, I was to know happiness, I was to know peace. As it's an experiential, like it's like how I know Howard, I know Charlotte, I know Kevin, I know Dell, I know, Eileen still has that Christmas tree up there. I know that thing's gonna rock until the next Christmas. I know Stan, Stan's from Utah. Like I know Stan, right? It's an gnosis and experiential stuff, right? So, and I like that change of heart, right? That another sneaky description of a spiritual experience. I talk about all that when I go through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous about the word change. And this is my opinion. You can just take it or leave it. And is when they say the word change, a change came over them, a complete change in their outlook and upon life. I think they're talking about transformation. And that's his was dramatic. It happened. We're going to talk about it in the next few paragraphs, but his was pretty dramatic. Mine was dramatic more than once. It was it says God comes to most men, right? But his impact on me was sudden and profound, right? Mine was sudden and profound many times. Uh, as I go through this journey of a relationship with power, right? All right, back to you, Paige. Keep it real.
Pew, pew, pew. Absolutely. And I love that what we're starting with on page 56 is Mayo's barriers to belief in God. And we're talking throughout We Agnostics about the barriers that we bring to the table. And these are Fitz's barriers to belief in God. And I want to point something out. These are real barriers. We're not ignoring them, we're not minimizing. I mean, first of all, minister's son, and I didn't grow up religious. I didn't grow up around the church, but there's a stereotype there. You know what I mean? I just know that there is that stereotype minister's kid. All the eyes on that kid, gotta be perfect. And so they are like, woo, let me do me. I'm bouncing around all over the place. I'm gonna be bad. So he's got that. So he's grown up in a household full of religion and a household full of religious pressure. He attended church school, so not only that is he getting that religiosity shoved down his throat at school, and he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. So he's over it. He's sick of it. He's not into it. And when it talks about what was dogging him for the next couple of years, so the first barrier is he grew up in it. He was had it shoved down his throat. He's done. Ugh, I'm over that. So, and that is a legitimate barrier. Now, these are some other barriers. When it talks about trouble and frustration, business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. Now, when we talk about the word calamity, I often recontextualize that word as, if he was writing this in 2025, he might use the word trauma. Like these are things that happened to his immediate family. There was business failure. So just their a total like business collapsed. Insanity, fatal illness, and suicide. And that is heavy in his immediate family. That is a lot for anybody to go through. And that is legitimate pain and suffering. And you know what I mean? Like that is heavy. Sorry, I just noticed Heather's picture. It was the dog, and I was like, it's like the dog Wishbone. For any of you that grew up in the 90s, it was a Jack Russell Terrier that taught us literature. Just love it. Love it. So glad you're here. I have the attention span of a gnat, and it is worse today. Like, oh, she's a fruit fly today. Just no attention span. So welcome. I'm glad you're all here. Tangents Anonymous is in full force. All right. So those are real, genuine, traumatic, like things to go through, and there's pain and suffering and grief, and how could there be a God and this and that? And then when it talks about post-war disillusionment, the war that they're talking about is the First World War. And the First World War, man, that was horrific. There was a loss of life that humanity had not seen on that scale before. Trench warfare, where these young men's lives are being snuffed out for not even an inch of ground. It's the first time where that like chemical warfare was used in like mustard gas, and it would kill indiscriminately. And there was a level of PTSD that they had not seen before. Like it was horrific. And he comes back after the First World War, and I don't know what his involvement was, but there was that like, what's the point? You know, what's the point of all this? Returning back to normal society. What's the point? That malaise with existence. And then, of course, even if we can't relate to personal calamity, maybe we can't relate to having religion shoved down our throat. Maybe we don't relate to that existential dread and malaise that pervades us, but we can all relate to this ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse. Whatever brings you to this all inclusive study. I have a feeling if you're sitting through the Lunacy Commission, man, it is beating you up, chewed you, and spit you out like it is. You are a desperate case, and I'm so glad you're here. So we can all relate to those barriers. If there's a God, why? And so here's what happens. It says one night when confined in a hospital. The hospital is the town's hospital. New York City. We got Charlestown's. Oh man, this is the second time this week. I have the book. If you're ever interested, and I left it over there. But if you're ever interested in the history, I know I see you're looking. If you got it in arm's reach too. Oh, we got lots of people looking. Keep an eye on the screen. We're gonna see some people holding up books. Oh yeah, we got 3 copies. King Charles in New York City. I love that. And it was in sync, you guys. It was in sync. That was, coordinated. Love it. If you're ever interested in reading the history of the town's hospital, in a like sort of grand view of like its inception, its growth, it's when it began to fall apart. But that's the hospital that he was in. And and it's significant for us. We wouldn't have, so many of us wouldn't have a copy of this book if it wasn't significant for us. It's significant for us because that is where Dr. Silkworth worked. And that is where Bill Wilson had his white light spiritual experience. And so that's the hospital. So he was approached by an alcoholic who had known a spiritual experience, not known of a spiritual experience, but known. Again, why I emphasize that knowing, what we're after is a knowing experience of power, of the universe, of capital R, reality of God, higher power, whatever you want to say. We are after a known experience of that. Not an idea, not a conception, not a belief. We got to start there, but we deepen it. And so he was approached. So some guy was trying to help 12-step him. And it says, our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out. Now, I will say one other thing. I really do need to use that euphemism in my modern language. When somebody's asking you to do one more thing and you're overwhelmed and overstimulated, and it's like, my good sir, you have aroused my gorge. That's I think that's your sponsee's not listening and not doing the inventory you told him to do a million times. My gorge is aroused with your lack of inventory. Maybe not. Maybe I won't. I will. We all know it. I will. So what that's saying is like he's getting offended, affronted. He's getting a little reactionary, a little sensitive, a little like, hey, you don't know. And it says his friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, if there's a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me. And it makes sense he'd feel like that. Look at those barriers. And this is important. But later, alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible? Now, I love the phrase, is it possible? Now, that phrase, is it possible? And just in my experience, that is such a helpful way to communicate. I picked up that phrase from Mark Houston when I was doing Steel on Steel, which is a spiritual exercise where you kind of get together and hold each other spiritually accountable. And then you share honestly about the struggles that you're having living a spiritual life. Not, oh, yeah, I'm doing real well, but like, here's where I'm falling short. And then the other members will give you considerations, but always using the phrase, is it possible or would you consider? And using that phrase when we're working with people, when we're talking with people, when we're offering spiritual considerations for sponsees, like what their mistakes are, their faults are in the fourth column of resentments. Is it possible? Is a beautiful way. So just well, have yet that in your little back pocket. Is it possible? But he says, but later alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? It's possible that they're all wrong. Is that possible? And he's sitting, he's alone. It's that last analysis. He's by himself. Is it possible? And while pondering the answer, he felt as though he lived in hell. Now, there's a lot of places in this book where we will find the word haven or capital U, utopia. It's because when this book went out, they had it edited by some people in different faith traditions to make sure there wasn't anything offensive. And there was a group that was like, you cannot say that heaven is in the here and now. But here's my, and which is totally fine. They absolutely. But here's my experience. My experience as an alcoholic, my experience as an addict. Where can I find hell? Well, hell is a here and now experience. Hell is in this moment. And if you, man, if you're hanging out with us on a Friday, I am so glad you're here. Saturday morning, if you're Kevin in Australia, glad you made it. But if you're here with us, you know what it is like to live a living hell, an existence that is intolerable. Where can hell be found? In the here and now. But here's my experience as a recovered member. Where can heaven be found? And it's fine if you have theological beliefs that is an after place. That's cool. But here's my experience. I can find heaven in the here and now. I can find joy in the here and now. I can find peace in the here and now. I can find serenity in the here and now. So in the here and now, he was experiencing hell. And it says, then like a thunderbolt, a great thought came. It crowded out all else. Do you want to take that great thought? Over to you. Pew pew.
It says, "Who are you to say there's no God?" Uh, he flipped his conception. I mean, I talked about it on page 47. Are you willing to believe, or are you now, or do you believe, or are you willing to believe there's a power greater than yourself? And you take all your negative conceptions of a power greater than yourself, you write them down and you flip them. So I'm willing to believe that, I said God was boring, so I'm willing to believe that God is fun. I flipped it. So I'm gonna go pray to a fun God. I do have a pretty fun God. He's pretty hilarious, right? Or I have a judgmental God. Well, then I'm willing to believe there's a forgiveness God, right? And the same thing he did here. He flipped his conception. Um, I mean, yeah, it says this man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed. Uh, that word just hit me. Overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. The presence of God poured over and through him with the certainty and majesty, can't say that word, of a great tide of flood. The barriers he had built through the years were swept away. So what barriers do we talk about? Right? Being obstinate, right? Being stubborn, right? All sorts of fixed ideas, traditions, superstitions. What's the other one? I forgot. Unreasoning prejudice or being sensitive. And I asked you guys last week, I think 2 weeks prior, to write down all your superstitions, your fixed ideas, your unreasoning prejudices, and stuff like that, and see where you are blocked off from power. See where your current agnostic thinking, where you believe there's a God in your life, it won't work for you, so this is what you're going to do in that moment. Or I believe there's a God in my life, but I'm not living like there's a God in my life when it comes to tradition, fixed ideas, superstition. And these barriers like that were swept away, right? And what happened? He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his creator. Here's something to ponder. Perhaps I've always had a companionship with my creator. I was just never aware of it. I was just never aware of it. He woke up. I woke up. I think when my sponsor asked me, "Can you explain God?" And I literally tried to explain everything to him. And then he's like, "It's pretty hard to explain everything because God is everything and everything's God and you're not God." That's what he said to me. And I got to tell you, something burst out of me. Something poured over and through me. I felt infinite power and love. And it was in a little coffee shop called Caribou. It's in Minnesota. Yeah. Who would have thought that I would have that experience in that moment? I don't know what the hell happened to me. I just don't. Another happened. I remember I said God is his impact on me is sudden and profound. It's happened to me many times. Happened to me when I was making amends. Happened to me when I'm reading with people. It happens to me on a day-to-day basis when I'm aware, when I'm awake, when I'm watching. Yes, I get to watch for the manifestations of self in step 10, but I recommend you try this. Watch God work his magic. Go watch God work his magic in all of his kids. I mean, how cool is it when you see someone change over a period of time? You're like, he was a knucklehead in the beginning, right, Stan? Oh, that little knucklehead. Like when you first start talking to the newcomer or prospect, and then they're a pain in the ass, right? And then all of a sudden, in a year or two, or it's kind of shorter than that, it's most likely between 60 and 90 days, something revelatory happens to them. All right. And that's been my experience, depending on where they're at in the book. But um, you could just see that a change came over them. You could see that there's all those barriers that we talked about and we looked at in the lay aside prayer that was given to them. They're actually acclimating it to their life. You see them acclimating the fear prayer. God, please remove my fear and direct my attention to what you have me be. Be courageous, be a father, be a messenger, be a friend, be nice. Be kind to other people. Um, be forgiving. I mean, I get to see these people pick up that simple kit of spiritual tools that was given to me, and I pass it along to someone else, and they start using it, and then their life gets transformed. I'm like, damn, this stuff works. Like my friend in Las Vegas would say, it works. God is real, and I'm not afraid. His name's Sheldon F. Go on YouTube and check him out. He's awesome. Yeah, so perhaps I've always lived in a conscious relationship with this creator. I just was never aware of it. We're waking you up. I guess Howard, like when I said we're waking up the Walking Dead, right? There's a lot of people walking around asleep. They really are. Even non-alcoholics too. They're asleep. It's crazy. I have a beefing with my boss, my supervisor lately, and I had to pause so many times. He's trying to irk me. He's trying to get things out of me. He's totally unprofessional, totally unqualified for his position. And he's trying to push my buttons. And I had a pause moment. I just said, "Yeah, no problem. I'm okay. Thank you. Hope you have a good day. Take care." Before I would try and rip his heart out. That was the previous theory. But that didn't happen. And these people are so disturbed. I remember sitting in my truck and I had that weird conversation with him prior. This was yesterday, and he was just acting like a fool and taking all his frustration and anger out of me, Stan. And I was pissed off. I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty pissed off. I had a justified resentment. Anyone have a justified resentment? Someone, yeah, except for Howard, he's a saint. Yeah. Yeah, I had a justified resentment. I was wronged. And I'm sitting in this truck and I had a pause moment. This is the awareness. This is the gnosis. This is the experiential stuff that we're talking about. I had a gnosis. I had a God thought. You could call it a thunderbolt, like it did with Fitz Mayo. And it said, Terry, you're being dominated right now. I was like, oh shit. There's that good old brainwashing from Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm being dominated. That resentment has the power to kill. And I'm like, damn it. Why is page 66 just plastered to my forehead right now? All right. I'm being dominated right now. And I had a pause moment and I said, you know what, God, I'm willing to let it go. You know, if the word let, look through the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, circle the word let, and try and practice what that says. We let God demonstrate through us what we could do. There's a participation from us. We have to let God demonstrate through us. We have to let go those barriers, just like Fitzhugh did. What about let go absolutely? There's participation from me. That means I got to let go. That's what happened in that moment, and God removed it. Can't explain it. Can't, that's an experiential thing. And for some odd reason, I was back on the beam, happy as pie. This guy's still acting like a knucklehead, but I don't care what he says, thinks, and does because it doesn't affect me. It's not outside coming in. That's the craziness, you know. But I've always been in this companionship with my creator. I'm aware of it today. And the more I practice this on a day-to-day basis, it strengthens that relationship, which stops me from living in that hell that Paige is talking about. Because I could go down that rabbit hole. I was just talking to a new guy. Go to page five. What was it? I'm on a tangent here, page. Here I go. Go to page 570. I was just reading this to some guy when he was talking about some of the sponsor was telling him to do something with his sponsees, drop them, stuff like that. And he couldn't figure it out. And I said, hey, read this paragraph on top of page 570. So just kind of skip the first three sentences. It says, Alcoholics Anonymous are no crusaders. We're not a temperance society. They know that they must never drink. They help others with similar problems. In this atmosphere, the alcoholic often overcomes his excessive concentration upon himself. That's what I'm talking about. That being dominated by my thinking, learning. I have to learn this stuff. That's why we come to big book studies to learn. Then there's an application process, and then there's a living process to it afterwards, right? So I'm supposed to learn this stuff. If you're new, be new. You don't need to be Mark Houston, or Myers R. and all those cats or Joe Hawk and stuff like that. Be new, but your object is to learn, but is to apply because it will help you with your excessive concentration of yourself and it'll get you out of yourself so you can be useful to other people. That was my experience, and I had a awareness and a companionship with my creator, and I still continue to live in it today. I'm back. I'm back. You know, it's crazy how fast I get back to the being now. It used to take me when I get a resentment page, take me like in the beginning of recovery, like 2, 3 months. It'll take me like 2 weeks to get back there. 2 weeks roughly, right? And then I get back there, and then over time goes, I'm getting back to 3 days. Now it's 2 days. Now it's like 5 hours, and then 1 hour, and then I was being dominated with an unjustified resentment for 30 minutes. Felt like a lifetime, but I had this excessive over concentration of myself. If I don't do that, I'm not useful to you, and I'm not living with power. I'm unaware of it. I'm back to being asleep. And I'll tell you, this is a dangerous thing to be asleep. If I'm asleep for a very long time, I'll have an insane thought come in. And it will be really tempting. It'll be logical, it'll be reasonable, it'll be rationalized and everything. And I'll think drink solution, drink answer to feel better. That's the deal. Right back to you, Paige. Sorry for the tangent.
Oh no, I'm going on several myself. Don't you worry. I love the tangents. Tangents Anonymous. Pew pew. And so that moment, who are you to say there is no God? That, that is what begins Fitz Mayo's second step experience. So that, and the paragraph that Terry just read, where he tumbles out of his bed to his knees, that is, bear with me, step two for Fitzmayo, step two, part one. Now, I'm going on a tangent, but we'll try to keep it reined in. Part of why I love Fitz Mayo, like he's my guy, he's my homie, I love him, is because he was the first guy in the book that I was able to see myself in. I was able to see myself in his story. You know that moment when you're reading the book and you're like, wait a minute, how'd they know? You know? And that was my experience with Fitz. And I first had that experience in the doctor's opinion. It's on page XXXI. We don't have to go there. He's the second. You can if you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do. There's that. Don't go there. That's how you make people like us actually turn to that page. Be like, don't go there. You don't want to do it. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going there. But Fitzmail, he's the guy that he was desperate and he was hopeless, and he hid in a deserted barn, determined to die. And I related to that. You see, I came here asleep, as Terry was talking about. I was asleep, not only, to the spiritual world, but I was asleep to my own illness. I did not know what it meant to be an alcoholic. I did not know what it meant to be an addict. And I came here with my andas and my yabbats and my delusion and my denial and all the ways that I was different from you. And and now it's the two questions on page 44 that, man, you pegged me. You got me. I was right between the eyes, but seeing myself in Fitz's story. Hid in a deserted barn, determined to die, and he was rescued by a searching party. Now, I talk about this story, but I don't talk a whole lot about some of the places that my alcoholism and my drug addiction took me. But one of the places I ended up was I was living on the streets of Calgary. So I was homeless living on the streets of Calgary. And the reason I don't talk about this so much is because if you're like me, you're like, well, I wasn't homeless. Or if you were, you're like, well, I wasn't homeless in Canada. So I'm not that bad. We have some winters. Let me tell you about it. And I will. Uh, and I remember this one night. I had walked from, we have a large homeless shelter that's known as the drop-in center. And I had walked all the way from the drop-in center out to the very like edge of the city, right by the airport. And I had walked there all night. And I guess what had happened is my body had had a bit of like a collapse. My body just gave up. And I was sleeping. I was going to go right behind a dumpster because that is on brand for me. Uh, but I was a little more dumpster adjacent. I was worried I was going to get smushed by that old dumpster. And honestly, I was an absolute basket case, a nut, like just kind of the worst. But I was like, oh, but the garbage people are going to feel bad if they smush me, so I might as well go over there. So codependent on top of it, you know. It was around like October, November, and we were hanging around, and I have not done the math for Fahrenheit, so you get Celsius, and I apologize. But we were hanging around maybe 0 degrees Celsius, maybe as warm as 5, as low as -5. We were hovering around there, so it wasn't great. Oh, 21. Nope, nope. Terry
It
was
was 32, right?
30.
Oh no,
Zero is 32. Yeah, zero is
yeah, yeah.
32.
That
Yeah,
I know. That I
yeah.
know.
So it was around 32 Fahrenheit, give or take a little. Give or take some of those numbers. And I was, so it wasn't balmy. I wasn't having a great time. It was not a spa. But I had a blanket and a tarp and like one of those emergency blankets, and I slept all day. And then I slept all night. And then I slept all day and I slept all night. And it would have been on the third night where the temperature dropped. And we went to, it was about -30, maybe -34 or 5 with the wind chill. That's how the weather goes in Calgary. That's why my face hurts sometimes, because it'll be a nice day and then desperately cold or desperately hot, my face hurts. And that temperature dropped. And it was so cold. And like I had to physically take off my shoes and hold my feet in my hands because of how cold it was. And I always like to make the joke. You know what I didn't get? A searching party. There was nobody searching for me. I had burned those bridges. It's completely reasonable. But I remember that moment, and that is a moment that I should not be alive. That is a moment that I should not have all my fingers and toes. Not that I use all of them, but I definitely should not have them. And that was the first Fitz Mayo experience that I had, and it made this book begin to come alive for me. But just like I had one of those hopeless, desperate experiences like Fitz Mayo, have I also had a Fitz Mayo experience. Now, this experience that he's having on page 56, it is a second step experience. And we might hear like, oh man, you can't expect to have one like that. Well, yeah, maybe not on step two. Maybe not on step two. I ought not have that expectation. But I ought not sell the power of God short. You see, there was not a time in my life that I did not absolutely worship at the power of alcohol, the power of crack cocaine. Absolutely convinced that that power was going to work in my life. So who am I to come to places like this and sell this power short? The spiritual awakening I have is none of my business. But more than that, I can't stay well on one experience. I can't stay well on one drink. I can't stay well. Anyone here ever try to stay well on one drink? How'd that go? Anyone here ever have one hoot of crack? Let me tell you, that's not how that works. I'll be searching carpets forever. I'm not done. Uh, and that's my experience, is that I cannot stay well on one spiritual awakening. And so when people say, man, you can't expect to have an experience like Fitz, well, I've had a spiritual experience like Fitz, and I've had more than that. And I apologize for those that have been hanging out with me all this week, because you guys have heard this story, but I feel like I should tell it again, because we're in the Fitz Mayo section of the book. Fitz, he's my guy. He's my guy, but he's our Southern friend. See what I did? That's the title of the story of his book. I think I'm clever. The story that he has in the back of the book. Uh, but my experience was I love to do a lot of spiritual seeking in the 11th step. And I love to try from a variety of faith traditions, but you'll get an idea that I'm not one of the fun ones. I'm not doing one of the ones with the lights and the colors and the food. I'm like, yeah, let me give something up. Woo! I'm doing one of those. I'm like, let me give something up. And I was doing that for a number of years. And in this one tradition, what you do is you look to give something up, and I look to always give up that which I am turning to instead of God. That thing that I'm using to numb my feelings, that thing that I'm using to distract, that's what I want to look to give up. And what am I turning to instead of God? What is pulling me instead of God? And then I remember it was right before COVID, so it would have been starting at 20, oh, I guess 2020. The math is math, and it was right before COVID, and I knew and so I want to look to give something up, but I also want to, if I'm going to give something up, I got to add something to my prayer life, because if I'm giving up what I'm turning to God, I gotta get more God, or get more connected. And it's such a spiritual principle. I also got to find an additional way to be of service. And I remember I was so excited, because I knew what I wanted to add to my prayer life. I was so excited, and I knew I had figured out a way that I wanted to be of service, and I was excited for that, but I didn't know what I wanted to give up. And then I made a mistake, which is to ask people. Ugh. And so I was asking my sponsees, don't do this, because they'll tell you the truth. Oh gosh, there's nothing worse than, when you're telling a sponsee and they tell it right back to you. Oh, it's the worst. So I was asking some sponsees, what should I give up? And they're like, why don't you quit vaping? Now at the time I had switched from cigarettes to vaping, because I'm a child, and if my nicotine can taste like candy, amazing. So that's how I was consuming my nicotine. And believe me, there's no judgment on this story. And so I had the spiritual giant that I am. I was like, have you lost your mind? Absolutely not. Now, I didn't tell them this part, but I thought it. I don't rank sponsees, but if I did, you'd be at the bottom of the list. No, are you? Gosh, no. So stupid. And so what I was doing at the time was I was also doing a lot of two-way prayer, which is a meditative technique that was used by the Oxford group. And what I was doing is I remember I came to two-way prayer and I wrote a question, and that's kind of what you do to get some guidance. And the question was, what should I give up for this spiritual practice? And I did some spiritual reading, and I came into a place of quiet and in a place of stillness. And then what you do is you do writing. You start with a term of endearment and you write what comes to mind. And after that, you spend a couple moments, a couple minutes in just in the presence of your higher power. And I don't even know, I think some of it happened during the writing, but I think the moment, my Fitz Mayo moment even happened when I was sitting there in that the presence of this power. And I did not have a who are you to say there is no God, but what I had was how big is your God? And that was a thought that came to me. It was not from me, but it crowded out all other thoughts. And with that, how big is your God came a knowing that I couldn't have known on my own, and that knowing was you either trust me or you don't. And you're asking these sponsees to take this leap of faith, you need to take one too. And I was like, okie dokie, yep, all right, I'm gonna give up vaping. Okay, I'm gonna quit. And at this point in time, I was working with more and more sponsees, and this is back in the day when I was doing it in person. And so I was having them lining up back to back to back to back, and we were going every single day, which is how I sponsor today. I was moving into that sponsorship style. And it was working out that I wasn't able to sneak out and get my little, the in between little nicotine treats, trying to, yeah, some of you guys know, it's like, just get it in me before the next appointment. Yeah. And I wasn't able to get as many of those in. And I was like, see, it's meant to be. It's natural. I'm, God's got me. God's got me. And again, I want to emphasize like the spiritual being that I am. It was the day before I came to that real conclusion that, oh no, I've made a terrible mistake. I can't give up nicotine. Oopsie doopsies. Nope, I can't do it. My bad, my bad, my bad. I'm going to give up like being mean to me or something like that. I don't know. Because that was a real problem at that time. But wasn't able to give that up either, by the way. I remember I go to the coffee shop and I meet a sponsee. I receive that sponsee's fifth step. I have another one coming and we go outside for a smoke together. And I remember I didn't even get a good haul on the vape. But what happened is on my vape it had a lanyard, and that lanyard caught on the brake of my wheelchair and smashed to the ground. And I haven't had any nicotine since. And that's not a story. So if you, and by the way, if the more I talk about this, the more you want to have a little puff, you get your nicotine in. There's no judgment, not an ounce of judgment. This isn't really a story about nicotine. This is the story of the power of God. And if I'm willing to take surrendered actions, I can let this power work in my life and I will be taken to places that I didn't think possible. I genuinely did not think I could quit nicotine. I kind of had the thought that maybe I should check myself into a detox, but I knew I wasn't humble enough to do that, to be quite frank with you. Like I knew I couldn't do it. And God did it for me, and God does it for all of us. And so that was my Fitz Mayo experience. And I have had more experiences like that. Just like I went after the next drink, I got to go after that deepening experience of God. Now, Terry was reading that this moment, he tumbles out of bed, and it says in a few seconds he was overwhelmed by the conviction of the, and I'm going to point this out, capital P, presence of God. God as a present tense verb, God, higher power, in the here and now, moving and active. When it talks about how it pours over and through him, like there is a spiritual flow that happens here. And that flow, and with the certainty and majesty of a great tide at flood, we had actually, this ties in. You know when I started smoking? 2013. 2013, we had in Calgary, we had some floods. I started smoking in sobriety. Feel free to judge that. Calgary, Alberta, we had some nasty floods. I live right by the river, and I was evacuated to my brother and his wife at the time, their place, and they had a day home with screaming toddlers. I was a little on my last nerve, and I picked up nicotine because I'm like, I'm doing the program. I can get away with it. It got me. Um, but the thing with a flood is a flood will take everything with it. And many of us, what we have to do is we have to dismantle the barriers. And if you're wondering, but Paige, I still have these prejudices, these old ideas, how do I dismantle them? That is the purpose of 4 through 9. The inventory process is how we begin to dismantle. And that it like just absolutely blows away those barriers. And then when it says he stood in the capital P, capital I, capital P, capital L, he stood in the presence of infinite power and love. And that's what we get to experience. Infinite power, and I have no power, and infinite love. And we know my love is finite. If I got to pick up nicotine to deal with toddlers, uh, they would be like, "Where are you going?" And I would be like, "An outside quiet time." They figured out that means smoking very quickly. They're clever. uh, and that idea when it talks about stepping from bridge to shore, that is that leap of faith. That leap of faith that we have to make, and it was God is everything or else is nothing. That leaves us on this precipice. We have to make that leap of faith. And he made that leap of faith with this powerful experience of God. And he is able, step 2, part 1, he is able to believe that there could be a power greater than himself because he's experienced this power. We all can experience this power. Maybe not at step 2, but that is his step 2, part 1. The next paragraph is going to go into step 2, part 2, but I'm going to let Terry take that. Over to you, Terry. Pew, pew.
I was just thinking that, in the beginning of recovery, right around when COVID hit, I was around people who had 20, 15, 25, 30 years and they drank. And they were part of the, don't drink no matter what club. They were part of, don't drink, go to meetings. They were part of the, fellowship, is sufficient. Right? And they were like a balloon that needed to pop. And I was helping these individuals who had so much time, and prior to that, were on counting days, and I'm watching them step from bridge to shore. Like they had no idea the big book existed. It's crazy. I did a fifth step with someone who had 19 years and was sober throughout that time and was absolutely cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. And I watched him step from bridge to shore by doing exactly what it says in this book. I mean, how marvelous. What a You can't make this stuff up. Like, I know it's real. Like, you can't shake that from me. Um, yeah, all right. So what was it? Thus was our friend's cornerstone fixed in place. No later vicissitude or changes has shaken it. Yeah, I mean, you come to me and you tell me, Terry, stop believing in God and stop doing AA, and I'll give you $1 billion. And but I would say no, because my faith and love for this program and God is it's fixed in place. $1 billion can't shake it. No later vicissitude is shaking my faith. Like I know this stuff is real. I can't make this up, even though I questioned the shit out of it. I was like, yeah, that doesn't, I don't think so. What does writing inventory have to do with helping me stay sober? What is going to people and paying people back going to help me with staying sober? What is helping other people and sacrificing my time going to help with being sober? And it works. I just start doing all this crap, and I'm like, damn, this stuff does work, right? His alcoholic problem was taken away. Remember, we talked about problem, our dilemma, our lack of power. This guy had an acquisition of power, right? It was because he got rid of his thinking. You notice how we're trending, right? We spent a great deal talking about the thinker, our agnosticism, the talker that's in our head, the story that's in our head. Remember, I told you to count how many times it says thinking, ideas, intellect, thoughts, self. I mean, I got up to page 56. There's 63 mentions of thinking or thought or idea all the way up to this point. Now you're shifting. You're going to notice on the next page, it's going to say our right minds. You're going to notice that we're going from flawed thinking. This is from Joe and Charlie. We're going to go from flawed thinking to God thinking now. This is how we're shifting now. We're aligning our will. We're aligning our thinking with God because we're no longer listening to the story that's in our head. So that very night, years ago, it disappeared. Where'd it go, Stan? For brief moments of temptation. Sounds like step 10, right? What does it say on step 10? 84? I forgot where it was. I know it's one part of the 10 step promises. Oh, yeah.
Yep, you got it.
Well, we are neither fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation, right? I think that's it, right? Moments of temptation, the thought of a drink has never returned, right? That's a 10-step promise. Our second step, we are restored to sanity in our 10th step when we get there. What's up, Phoenix? Sorry. At such great times of great revulsion, what is the definition of revulsion? I kind of think it. Does that mean stop doing the work? That's my I'm just
Ocean, okay, okay,
looking at it like that.
hearing, but
Yeah,
it's like, oh, oh,
yeah.
that's like,
Uh,
that's revolution.
yucky four step, right? Yeah. Ugh. Gotta pay people back. Yeah. Seemingly he could not drink even if he would. God had restored his sanity. Now, when they talk about insanity, they're not talking about us being cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and having emotional mental disorders like bipolar or schizophrenia. No, they're talking about the insanity before the first drink. They're talking about how our minds are not thinking about drinking prior to drinking, right? We are not thinking about it at all. I've just been restored, which is kind of wild because if you really think about it, like I'm not, it's like I'm around alcohol today. It's like whatever to me. My wife works at a bar. Like I go to her bar and I have a blast. And people are drinking next to me and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right, cool, have fun. That looks fun. Enjoy it. I know I can't do it. But there's no thought process going on in my mind. I'll tell you another thing with sanity. What was it called? My wife, she put moonshine barbecue sauce on wings. We had this like 6 months ago. Yeah, 6 months ago. And I was like, oh, what the hell does that taste? It tastes like straight up liquor. And I'm like, oh no. My wife told me she's moonshine barbecue. And the guys, the big bad wolf didn't come out to play. Like I went there, I said a prayer, asked God to help me, and the allergy didn't kick in. I accidentally took a shot in recovery. Not a shot. My wife gave me a drink. It was like a what is it called? It looked like a slushy drink, but I didn't know that she was drinking because she hardly drinks. And I took a drink. Same situation. Big bad wolf didn't come out. Why is that? Because I was in fit spiritual condition. That was two times I just mentioned where I ingested alcohol and the allergy didn't kick in. What about being around people who drink and drug and all that stuff? I go to those sort of places where those people are at, so I could be useful. God has restored my sanity. He has changed and recreated my mind, but I am not cured. I have a daily reprieve. I say this all the time. Fitz Mayo had an awesome spiritual experience, and so did I. But that spiritual experience had an expiration date for me, straight up. I have to grow and maintain the spiritual experience. I have to grow and maintain a transformation or a change of heart on a day-to-day basis. I'm not even the same person I am a month ago. Reflect on that. Why don't you do that? Go on your morning meditation and ask yourself who you were a month ago compared to today. Have you grown or have you been stagnant? Yeah, because this book was written when someone had 4 years of most sobriety, right? Resentment was the number one offender. I tell you, look at complacency too. Complacency's right up there. If you're not changing and you're not growing, you might be going. I don't know where I stole that from. Yeah, sounds like an AA thing, right? I mean, look, if I could look, I talk to people who are in their last 30 days of recovery and they don't even know it. I'm trying to talk to them about it. Not a member of a home group, not helping other people, this and that. I'm telling you, you could become insane again because I will no longer be I will no longer have a companionship with my creator and be aware of it. I'll be totally blocked off because I'll be listening to this. I don't know, Paige. Do we have enough time to go through the whole rest? Why not? Let's
Let's
do it.
try for it. Yeah, let's try for it.
Knock it out, Paige.
All right. Well, real quick, and I even got us a tangent to go on. So when it talks about his friend's cornerstone is fixed in place, and that vicissitude is trouble or struggle. And then I looked up revulsion. They had revolting, which is disgusting, repellent. So what happens at the bottom of 56, top of 57? The thought of drinking is removed. It's gone. The obsession of the mind is taken away. And that is step two, part two. That step two, part one is, could there be a power that is greater than myself? Step two, part two, could that power remove from me the obsession of the mind? For Fitz Mayo, that is the case. It happened. It happened in his step two experience. So he's already got there. It happened. But just as Terry was talking about, if he does not continue on, that will get old and he will drink again. And he had permanent sobriety. He continued to do this and continue to work with others. What is this but a miracle of healing? Keep in mind, in step one, we are doomed to drink again and or relapse or use again, and it is gone. The thought to go back is gone. Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. What made him willing to believe? Well, he'd come to the end of himself. He saw the example of an alcoholic who had recovered. And he had that last analysis where, well, is it possible that every religious person I've known is wrong? That made him willing to believe. He humbly offered himself to his capital M maker. Then he knew. Now, what we're going to do is right when it says, who are you to say there is no God? Or right here on page 57, we're going to pop over to page 215 because I think it's important. It's what I like to call I call it the Fitz Mayo third step prayer. It's about halfway down the page. It's right after it says, yes, I reply. And actually, I have it so I can share on the screen. So I'll do that for anyone who's like having a hard time. Oh, I'm in the way. I didn't, oopsies. But it's right where it says, yes, I reply. That isn't the way, he continued. The thing I do is to say. Now, this is what I call the Fitz Mayo third step prayer. God, here I am, and here are all my troubles. I've made a mess of things and can't do anything about it. You take me and all my troubles and do anything you want with me. That's a very useful prayer, especially when we're needing a deeper surrender. So I'll real quick take us through the last of 57 and toss it over to Terry for anything else. So it says, even so has God restored us all to our right minds. The removal of the obsession of the mind, that sense of sanity, that happens to each and every one of us if we do this work. To this man, the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly. So unfortunately, some of us got to write some inventory before we get that glimpse of it. But we will all get that glimpse. And this is a promise. But he has come to all who have honestly sought him. We have to seek. How we seek is these 12 steps. It says, when we drew near to him. So how do I draw near to God? Again, that is the purpose of the 12 steps. He disclosed himself to us. So I've got to seek. Anything else you wanted to add, Terry? Pew pew.
No, I mean, I was just talking to my sponsor last night about it. Like, I don't, I put like maybe 1/100th of the energy and effort in into seeking God than I did with drugs and alcohol. And I had an effect. Like, if you ever listen to Sandy Beach, he talks about like different levels of seeking, right? You know, there's hide and seek, and then there's Easter hunting, right? Then there's like you lose your puppy or lose your cat. Those are all different levels of seeking, right? Then there's another level of seeking called, drugs and alcohol. I mean, who sought drugs and alcohol? I mean, shit. I mean, I would drive to the Bronx and drive halfway up, use half the bag, and like, I'm not gonna have enough for tonight. I'm going back down, and I'll go back down. Like that was a different level of effort. Imagine if you put that towards a power grid in yourself. I mean, yes, it is true that the longest road is between your mind to your heart, but it's more like it's from your heart to your knees. You know, you try doing these simple things, miracles will happen. Expect miracles when you do this work, right? That's all I got, Paige. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'll stop the recording and we can wrap it up with, oh, you know what we can wrap it up with? The Fitz Mayo third step prayer. Why don't we do that? All right, I'll stop the recording.